Hopefully, I have now made my case that performance gains over time are largely driven by movement. These first 2 years, you're going to get improvements in those physiological adaptations and VO2 max and lactate threshold. But after that, as I showed you here, performance is largely driven by improving your movement economy. So when you are evaluating a movement, make sure you understand the physics of the movement, you understand your posture and positions, which tie into the physics, but also tie into whether or not you can breathe or brace in that position. And make sure you are also not wasting any movement that is not allowing you to express more power in that position. If you are going to be making changes, it is going to first feel very uncomfortable. You're not going to feel super confident in it. You might actually be a little bit slower right off the gate, getting used to the new technique. So remember, if you are going to try to improve your performance through movement, you might have to take one step back to be able to take 2 steps forward. There is a process of refining your movement that's not super linear because you have a lot of reps under your belt. In this video, I am going to make the argument that one of the best ways to make performance gains in training is through movement training. Now, I think that applies to all movements, but from a demonstration perspective, I'm going to dissect it through the lens of improving your ability on the ski erg. First things we got to know about being efficient on the ski erg is kind of the physics of the machine. I would assume most of you would know what a force curve looks like by using the rower. Rowing has been tested in CrossFit and in functional fitness for as long as I can remember, so probably as long as you guys can remember as well. And many people will tell you to look at the force curve on the monitor and try to get a continuous pull throughout the movement. Now, a force curve as a graph when you're looking at it is a reflection of basically how much power at each position of the pull you're putting into the machine. So if you're on a rower, you have this kind of bell curve-like looking force curve, which is optimal for performance. In the beginning part of the pull, you're kind of all compressed in the machine and your legs are all the way flexed into flexion, so you don't really have the best position to create power. But as you start to push away, you start to get your body into something that looks like a deadlift position where you can incorporate your powerful hips and legs and quads to be able to put the maximal amount of power into the rower. And then as you get to the end of the pull, your arms kind of finish and give you a little bit of extra force at the end of the pull. And each pull kind of has this gradual bell curve. Now, when you're looking at a ski erg, the mechanics of the actual machine itself are very different. The handle's all the way at the top, and you're basically pulling down with gravity. So when you're on a ski erg, an ideal force curve looks a lot different and a lot more steep. So your biggest power that you get to exert on the machine is right at the beginning of the stroke. So you have this very high increase in force right off the bat when you're on a ski erg. After that, as you're starting to pull down on the machine, you're basically having a lowering of force all the way through the pull. So an optimal force curve on a ski erg is much steeper in the beginning of the pull than a rower, and it continues to flatten. On a rower, it gradually builds up, it peaks at about the middle of the stroke, and it falls down. So if you're doing training for movement and you're trying to optimize your ability to ski erg well, you need to kind of understand the physics and how to optimize your technique to put the most amount of power very early on in the stroke. So a skier is different in a rower in that there's more power at the top, there's way less power at the bottom or the end of the stroke, and that generally speaking, because you're getting all of your power in that kind of like first third of the pull, you're gonna have to kind of have a shorter and higher stroke per minute frequency in comparison to a rower to be an ideal skier. Now, when you look at people actually ski, they don't really take this physics into consideration. And what oftentimes you see is at the bottom position, people are bent way over on the skier. Their heads are basically below their hip line. And what this is doing is basically adding a lot of extra movement of your torso, but the actual handles don't really go that much lower, because if your head is all the way down, the machine itself is not going to allow you to bring the handles lower because the string has a fixed endpoint. So whether your head is here and you're pulling your arms down versus head being all the way down here and pulling your arms down, your hands are going to pretty much go down to about the same point. And all of this extra pulling at the bottom, we've already referred back to, is not really giving you a lot of force on the row or on the ski erg handles. So this bottom position is not good. I got it in red, it says no, and basically it's circling back because you don't really want to try to spend a lot of time in the bottom position of a ski pole because there's so little force that you can apply to a machine. Conversely, we want the position to be a little bit more tall and vertical at the bottom position of the ski. So when you finish your downstroke, you want your body to be a little bit more vertical. We want it to be more vertical because we want a higher stroke per minute frequency so that we can get back up to this powerful portion of the stroke quicker and do more of those to keep the flywheel spinning at a faster rate. Now, to illustrate this, we're going to go to the floor and I'm going to actually show this on the machine with myself and we'll look at demos. But I wanted to do a little meathead math for you. Future Max here. Remember, I am talking about the ski erg, but all of these principles of wasted motion, positions, and optimizing them for performance can apply to all movements. So keep that in your mind as we're going through this, that you can tie it back to improving your movement economy in any movement will improve your performance in that movement. And I call it meathead math because I'm sure there are people out there in exercise science or physics who are going to basically question how some of this math was calculated, but I wanted to illustrate a point about how much potential wasted motion and wasted energy you have if you kind of use this non-optimal or this no technique that I have up on the whiteboard. So let's just say that the difference in center of mass, if you keep a more vertical posture versus a bent over head below hip posture, is about 2 feet. I call this the delta of center of mass. So you have a 2-foot difference in your upper body center of mass on this high stroke versus this low stroke. If we then say the upper body weighs anywhere from 70 to 100 pounds, and I just picked that's half of the body weight of somebody that's 140 to 200, which is kind of the average body size of somebody in CrossFit. The stroke per minute frequency, let's say somebody is very commonly on the skier between 35 and 40 strokes per minute in a Metcon setting. Let's say you have to ski for somewhere between 6 and 10 minutes in a workout. Let's say it's like 5 rounds of 25 or 30 cals on the machine. So you're going to be on the machine for 6 to 10 minutes. And then we have 4 feet of total distance to cover. 2 feet with your center of gravity going down, and then 2 feet with your center of gravity coming back up. That's basically lessened if you have this technique versus this one. So if you're going down 2 extra feet, you got to get your upper body to come back up another 2 feet every single time versus this taller posture. So if we multiply all that out, we get 58,800 to 160,000. And here's why it's meathead math, because I'm not exactly sure what the calculation and what the units are. I think it's foot-pounds, might be foot-pounds per second. But the point is, it is a lot of wasted movement. You are wasting movement because as you are lowering your center of gravity further and you're doing this extra work, the handles aren't really moving that much. And any extra pull down here that you are getting is so low on the force curve that you're spending extra energy moving your body down and up in that low range of motion, but it's not actually transferring into any force on the machine. So I call it wasted motion because you are literally moving your body, but you're not actually being able to exert any force on the handles. Therefore, you are being completely inefficient with your motion. Let's talk about really how this applies to all movements in training. So right here, I have a graph, and this graph is kind of intuited based on years of research that has been done in the endurance space on physiological testing and performance in sport. What we have basically is performance or output on the y-axis and time on the x-axis. And what they did over time is they did research on endurance athletes. They did physiological testers like VO2 max and lactate threshold. So that's my kind of purple and brown line right here are VO2 max and lactate threshold, but they also took performance gains. So basically, what did that person do in an actual race setting? So if it was a marathoner, they're using marathon times for performance, or if it was a triathlon or a triathlete, they're using triathlon scores as a marker of performance. And year over year of testing, what they found with people is that these physiological fitness markers, so VO2 max and lactate threshold, they had pretty steep early gains in training. So most of the stuff that I read said it's about 2 years where most of the gains of lactate threshold and VO2 max are going to be had. Now, if you don't know what VO2 max and lactate threshold are, they're just like physiological proxies for fitness. VO2 max is basically how much oxygen you can take in and utilize as a function of your body weight or in comparison to your body weight. And lactate threshold is basically the fastest work rate that you can hold before you start to accumulate in lactate, which basically says you're shifting from more aerobic processes to anaerobic processes. So these two physiological markers are used very heavily in the endurance community in testing. And if we know that they peak out almost 2 years into somebody's training, but performance is going to be increasing for a decade or a decade plus, we know that there is something driving adaptation in performance that isn't just the fitness that you get from really hard work and respiration. Now, the theory is, and I kind of ascribe to this theory, that difference or that delta in why performance keeps getting better when physiology isn't really necessarily showing gains over time is because your movement is becoming more economical. So you are actually using less energy to perform the actual movement. The tendons in the specific patterns are stiffening. Your motor cortex is getting more efficient in that pattern. You're becoming more desensitized to all the experiences so your mind can stay calmer and you use less energy from a thinking perspective and you can become more automatic in mind. So generally speaking, you're going to get most of your performance gains very early on in your training, a couple years, and then after that, refining your movement and getting more efficient in the way that you move is going to be one of the biggest things to continue your performance going up. So we talked about this through the lens of the skier, but this could be applied to muscle up, thruster, double under. Now, the physics of each movement is going to be different, and you're going to need to be with a coach or doing research to understand with your body and that specific movement, what do you need to do to get more efficient? But doing the movement training, analyzing this stuff, and optimizing your movement will allow you to continue your performance gains even if the global systems that help you create energy and utilize energy are not necessarily accelerating at the same rate that your performance is. So this kind of ties the theme together that we talked about, where I tried to say I would make the argument that performance gains can come from movement training. This is what I'm saying, and this is why I think some of the technical nuance that we looked at through the ski erg is so important. So if you want to improve your performance through movement training, my recommendations are: 1, to refine your movement. Think about economy, all of the positions that you're getting into. The best way to do this is to literally video yourself. Look at your video, compare that video to people who are best in class, do research with coaches that are specialists in whatever that area is, and allow yourself to see your own movement changing in your own videos over time. You really have to be a studious or a good student with regards to movement. Really study technique to understand how you can apply that into your own movements. Again, we talked about it through the lens of the ski, but it could be all movements can be broken down like this. To be able to make the shift into this more economical pattern, it is going to first feel very uncomfortable. You're not going to feel super confident in it. You might actually be a little bit slower right off the gate, getting used to the new technique. So remember, if you are going to try to improve your performance through movement, you might have to take 1 step back to be able to take 2 steps forward. There is a process of refining your movement that's not super linear because you have a lot of reps under your belt. All right, that's all I got. Hopefully this video helped you understand how performance gains can be made through movement training. If you're somebody that needs improvements in the skier specifically, we covered that in depth. If not, apply these principles to other movements and go out there and get better. If you're interested in better understanding our methods and how we break down movement and right training progressions, head over to trainingthinktank.com/education and check out our courses.